Hello and welcome to Unspun Live, the Herald's Politics podcast. We are now 3 months away from the Holyrood election, less than 3 months away from the Holyrood election, and it is shaping up to be quite a campaign. On this week's episode of the podcast, Kathleen Nutt, political correspondent at the Herald, is speaking to Iris Duane, who is the Scottish Green candidate in Glasgow Kelvin and Maryhill, a seat the party are hopeful they can take off the SNP.
First question, very simple, is, why are you standing for the Scottish Greens as their candidate, their constituency candidate for Glasgow Kelvin and Maryhill?
This is the big question. It's the question that most people tend to ask me straight away, especially because of my age. I'm standing because politics, I feel like, for too long has been dominated by people who tell us what the working people want, but have absolutely no clue what life is like for the working people. Currently, we've got a party set to be in opposition, led by a man who sails around in his yacht. And we've got an SNP that after 17 years of government is running out of ideas. So I'm standing to fight for a better future, to make sure people in my constituency are heard, and to fight against the rising inequality we're seeing in our society.
And what age do you mind me asking? What age are you? Do you mind me asking?
23 years.
23. So you're probably if not the youngest candidate, probably one of the youngest candidates.
One of the youngest ones. I think there may be one person who's slightly younger in the SNP, but yeah, certainly on the younger side.
So far, yeah.
In 2024, I stood for Glasgow North, which is a very similar constituency, and I was 21 years old at the time, so that was hot.
Yes. How would you find that, standing as a candidate in that election? Did you enjoy it, or was it hard? Was it difficult? Was it all those things?
I think it was all of those things. I mean, I absolutely loved it, and it was a great experience for me. And obviously, Scottish Greens have never had a Westminster seat, so I wasn't looking to win it in the same way that I am for this election. But getting out there and speaking to people was very important to me. There aren't a lot of people in politics from my background, whether or not that's my class, my race, or my gender. So it's quite important to me. A lot of the support I got, not just in the constituency, but across the country, saying thank you for standing up. And it really did highlight to me, and I knew this before, but these divisions that we often find in politics, all this finger pointing on the doors, it doesn't really exist. People just want to hear what you've got to say and how you'll make their lives better.
Interesting. And probably standing in that election has, I'd imagine, helped you raise your profile in the area, so you may have a better chance then of getting elected this time round, because you'll be, hopefully a familiar face to many people in the area. And have the Greens got a lot of support in Glasgow Kelvin? I mean, they came, I think, as I understand, they came second in the last Holyrood election. So Patrick Harvey came second to Colcab Stewart from the SNP. Does that support remain?
Absolutely. I've been out on the doors. We've been getting some fantastic support. It is a brand new constituency. It is a bit larger, but that support in all the areas that we've been to has remained. People are completely sick and tired of seeing the same things happen over and over and over again, and seeing the status quo happening, and things only, if they're getting better, getting marginally better. So they're looking for braver, more outlandish politicians who will say what they're thinking, but also listen to them at the same time. And I've been really enjoying being out on the doors so far, and I'm hoping that continues through the entire campaign.
Do you think support is actually growing? I mean, there have been polling that's suggesting that the Greens could actually get 10 MSPs this time round. They got 8 last time. Is support growing for the Greens, do you think? And also, what sort of reception are you getting on the doorsteps in Glasgow, and Maryhill?
I think support is growing. The polls, of course, are showing us in a better position than we went into 2021 in. I'm hoping, of course, they will improve again over the campaign period. It's still very early out from the election. Like I just said, the doors have been really positive so far, even from the individuals that are saying they aren't voting for us, are saying, we might give us your list vote. And people are just looking to hear what we've got to say. We are, again, quite a bit out for the election, so a lot of the reception on the doors is, when is it happening? What's happening?
And where is your support coming from when you're around the doors? Or, I mean, obviously there'd be people who always vote Green, but are there people who maybe have voted for other parties and they're saying, this time round I'm thinking of voting Green? Or Is that happening?
I would definitely say so. There's a lot of people who might have voted for Labour in the last general election, who maybe previously voted for SNP or always voted for Labour, who just feel absolutely scunnered by the UK government and think that the SNP is tired after 17 years, who are saying that they're voting Green for the first time. That's always a great thing to hear, people who've never considered voting Green. But then also we're getting support from people who, like myself, find their politics is rooted in their class. I'm very proudly working class. I'm a socialist and I'm not ashamed of that, who are saying we need more people like that in Parliament that don't want to play games or avoid the unfortunate truths of the inequality that we're living in.
So there are people who were Labour voters maybe last time, but maybe been SNP voters before, and they may have voted Labour perhaps to remove the Conservatives in power, but they're now sort of maybe don't want to go back to the SNP, but they're moving. And what have they said? The reasons why they're not voting for the SNP?
People are just tired. They just want change. They've felt, we've all felt the squeeze, the cost of living. We've got everything is kind of falling apart around us. Yes, Scotland is doing marginally better on the metrics in many ways than England, but we're still not doing nearly as much as we could. We have this Parliament, our Holyrood Parliament, and to be clear, I believe in independence, but while we're still in this devolved settlement, a lot of people like myself entirely believe we should be pushing that to its limit, doing everything we can to reduce inequality to make sure everyone's supported. I mean, right now in Glasgow, 1 in 3 children live in poverty. I grew up in poverty. I'm not ashamed of that. It's maybe the person I am today, and my mum fought incredibly hard to raise me and my little brother. But it doesn't often feel like our government is doing everything. It's doing some things, and I'll never fault them for the things that they're doing, but everything that they could be doing to kind of bring that down.
What have you ideas about what the Scottish Government could be doing to try and tackle poverty more? What sort of things do you think they should be doing to help children in poverty?
Well, the SGEC published their plans on tax and spend, on how we could use a devolved settlement to raise so much money for our public services. I mean, particularly if you look at our local councils, whilst they might be having some slight raises in money that is given to them, they're having to cut services and spending a lot of it on social care where the government is falling through. Using the money that we could from taxing more and ensuring that it's put in the right places, we could be supporting all of this wraparound care for people, making sure everyone has 3 meals a day, making sure everyone's got shelter, and making sure everyone's got warmth. Scotland, we're a very energy rich nation, and yet 1 in 3 people are also energy poor. How does that even make sense? We have everything at our fingertips, and sometimes it really feels like the SNP aren't brave enough to go and use it.
Do you think they should be doing more to tackle council tax as well, in terms of, there have been reports that because the Scottish Government didn't increase income tax in their budget, that the councils will now be forced to raise income tax quite substantially. Is that a concern? And what do you think the government could be doing to tackle council funding, I suppose?
That is 100% a concern. Like 100%. We've been promising to abolish council tax for however long. Nothing's changed. It's an outdated system that's often punishing people for where they live, irrespective of how much money you've got. At the end of the day, it's not working for absolutely anyone. Our councils need to be given more powers to raise funds and be given more central funds by the government than relying on this fallback, because ultimately it's just handing on the effective cuts that we're getting from central government down to the working people in the constituency and in the local councillors. And I've said this before, it's not just, I won't sit here and be like, oh, Green councillor are perfect and no one else is. We've got councillors of all parties, every single party, representing their local wards, who have got their hands and legs tied behind their back, unable to do the things they need to do because the Scottish Government isn't giving the funding to do it, and therefore they're passing those cuts on. I just think it's disgraceful, to be honest. Yeah,
a lot of people the council services are in a poor way, aren't they? The councils keep saying they haven't got enough money to improve services. In terms of if you are elected to Holyrood in May, what would your sort of top priority be, do you think, as a new MSP?
I think child poverty. I think I've already mentioned that. Like I said, I grew up in poverty. I'm not ashamed of that. I'll never be ashamed of that. My mum fought and continues to fight incredibly hard for everything she gave to me and my little brother, but nobody should ever have to fight as much as she did. So for a bit of context, my mum had only been 18 for 2 months when she gave birth to me, living in insecure housing, and she put herself through college, she put herself through university, and instilled me with these values of, you've got to give back to your community, fight for everyone. I'd take that opportunity, if I was given it, hopefully, to sit in Holyrood and say, we aren't doing enough. Why do we accept poverty, being in such a wealthy nation, why do we accept that there will be children going to school hungry every single day, that they will then go home to an incredibly cold house and just deal with that? And how can we then turn around and say, oh, they're going to have similar outcomes to other children who don't have that? That's absolutely a lie.
Do you think the Scottish Government should be increasing the Scottish child payment for more children then? I think they're increasing it for, I think, under ones for families who've got babies up to one. But do you think they should be increasing it for older children as well?
Well, yes, but I would say the Scottish Child Payment as it is has been a success in many ways for what it set out to do. But my focus isn't just about giving people money for the broken system that we live in.
Yes.
It's about making that system less broken, making sure our parents aren't having to fork out so much money for some of the services that they may require, making sure that, there's enough childcare support, making sure that the costs of the very basics that we need in society aren't going up and up and up. These are things that are in the power of our politicians. They're right there in their hands. And we've spent so many years just accepting the settlement that we have and not challenging it nearly as much as I think we should be.
And you would be the first openly trans woman if you were elected in Parliament, the first openly trans MSP. Are there any things you would do were you elected in terms of that issue if you became an MSP?
I think I'm very careful with this question. I mean, I'm not running as the transgender candidate. I'm not running as the black candidate or any of that. I'm just running as myself, and I do happen to be trans. What I would say is that I would be elected and representing a group of people that have never really they haven't sat in our parliament before, and that would put me in quite a unique position. I think for me, what would be most important is having that representation. All of these things that people see in the news, in the media, and I've spoken about this before. There are many people that might have concerns because trans people aren't, you don't meet them in everyday life, and they might not understand having that opportunity to sit there in these rooms and say, well, this is what's happening. This is why people are afraid. These are disparities in our healthcare. This is how we fix it. And this is how we do it together as a community instead of just pointing fingers at each other, I think would be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Trans people, I think, make up something like, it's at 0.5% of the population in Scotland. But do suffer a lot of abuse and prejudice. Do you think have you experienced prejudice as a trans woman in Scotland as well?
If anyone feels free to look through my social media comments at any point, I'm sure they'll find some quite interesting takes on who I am.
Not to look at
it. I actually don't see a lot of that. It's been a very long time that people have been doing that kind of stuff to me, so it just kind of goes over there. Of course, I've faced barriers. I continue to face barriers, even in access to healthcare.
Really?
The Sandyford here in Glasgow, I think someone worked it out. If you want to go for your initial appointment, so that's just to speak to someone and say, I think I'm transgender, it's 226 years.
Really?
226
years.
Yeah,
it's a long wait.
So yeah, I continue to face those barriers, but I'm not, they don't dissuade me. I am who I am. That's not going to change anytime soon. I'm not, this is not a temporary thing for me. I'll be like this for the rest of my life. And I'm in politics, and I will authentically speak about that in politics. And that's that.
Do you worry that, in the Greens, the Greens do come across as a very pro-trans party. Are you worried that were you in Parliament, you're going to be meeting other people from different parties? We don't know who's going to be there. Would you be worried that you might experience transphobia in Holyrood if you were elected?
What I would say is the people that are elected to Holyrood are elected to represent the constituents and their parties, and are elected as adults. I'd expect the same respect from anyone that is in that chamber as I would be giving to them, and I'd be very disappointed if they did decide to turn around and disrespect me in such a way. If they choose to do that, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but right now I'm focusing on delivering for Glasgow Kelvin and Maryhill.
I don't want to get this caught up in the trans debate, but just one last question on the issue is about the toilets issue. So the Parliament brought in a ruling earlier, obviously last year, to say that if you could only use the toilets in your biological gender, in the gender you were born, and not in your lived gender. How do you feel about that?
I still, again, very disappointing. Essentially, I feel as though, personally, with a lot of stuff that happens in trans politics, if that's even what you call it, we forget that these are people. It's these ideas. Of course, I need to use the bathroom sometimes when I'm out of the house. And often I think as though stuff like this happens because there aren't trans people in the room a lot of the time to say, actually, this is how this would impact us. I don't, I'm not sure that should continue to stand. But again, I'm not sure how those rules are set in the Parliament. I don't believe it's elected officers that do that.
Would you try to change those rules if you were elected?
Again, I'm not sure if that's in the role of the officers. What I would do is definitely try to have an open dialogue. Like, do we believe this is appropriate? Is this serving everyone's needs in the Parliament? Are we being respected to each other? And see where that conversation takes us.
Yes.
But I won't be storming into Parliament on day one and demanding.
Right, you would do it in a quiet way.
Quiet might not be the right.
Behind the scenes, you'll be exerting your influence. Very good. So the other thing, actually, big issue for the Greens has been about the Bute House Agreement, and clearly the Bute House Agreement broke down very acrimoniously a few years ago, and Greens clearly voted against Hamza continuing as First Minister. And then there was a debate about the relationship between the SNP and the Greens. So we don't know what's going to happen in May. The poll suggests that the SNP will win, but not win a majority. And would you be open, and the Greens will, could do pretty well, maybe up to 10 MSPs or perhaps more even. Would you be open to a new Bute House Agreement with the SNP?
I think, first of all, it's not up to me. It'd be up to the party members, and there'd be a lot.
Your personal view.
Yeah, in my personal view, I think our Parliament is designed for collaboration between parties. I've often been disappointed when some of the parties have decided not to collaborate, especially over budgets, and get what's out of it. But what I would say, and I was very open about this at the time, and I continue to be very open about it, as a party, and do feel like the Greens made some mistakes in the Bute House Agreement. If, and it's a big if, we were to go in government and I'm an ASP, there definitely need to be some further promises, and not, my personal view is not a supply and demand agreement, looking at how that would work between us. But again, this is up to my party members to discuss what that agreement would look like. And then, I'm imagining a theory in my head, and then when it's in front of me, I can definitely talk about it. But what happened with the Bute House Agreement, in my opinion, we made quite a lot of mistakes. That, again, it was our first time in government, but we should certainly be looking to do more, whether or not we're in government or opposition in the next Parliament.
What mistakes do you think the Greens made in terms of the Bute House Agreement then with the SNP?
I think the SNP, as I said before, often don't think too far outside of the box. It's very status quo, being slightly better than England and enforcing managed decline. Just quite frankly isn't enough, in my opinion. Like I said before, I'm a socialist. I believe in the redistribution of wealth. I don't believe on passing on cuts. We've already touched on local government here. I think, going forwards, if the Greens were to be in government or even opposition, we need to really be looking at what we can do for local government in the next Parliament, and how that really fits into our strategy of making a more equal Scotland. Yes,
yeah, because I think that some Greens were quite angry when Humza Yousaf capped the council tax rises, wasn't it? And that led to a lot of acrimony, and maybe that sort of acrimony continued ahead of his downfall, I suppose. And in terms of Kate Forbes is standing down. So do you think that makes a sort of Bute House Agreement easier between?
Again, I'm not quite sure. It depends on who's elected to the Parliament, what the numbers of the Parliament look like, and what the priorities of that Parliament are. I mean, we're taking it for granted that the SNP will be the largest party in Parliament, or even have enough numbers to make a government. But 4 months is a long time. A week is a long time in politics. And I think our polls could dramatically shift. We've seen what's happened in Wales, for example, where Labour's been not in Parliament, sorry, in government for however long, and Plaid Cymru are now surging. So right now I'm just focused on kind of how I can deliver for the constituency.
Yeah. And what about in terms of, the Parliament could look very different. I mean, very, very different from how it looks at the moment. And the polls suggesting that Reform could be the main opposition party, and Labour falling into third place with maybe the Tories fourth. And how would you feel about working alongside Reform MSPs?
I mean, the Reform Party, from what I've seen so far, is just Tory too. It's quite worrying, some of the language that we see coming out of a lot of their candidates, and sometimes from the reports Nigel Farage. We've seen their by-election candidate down in England. I can't even remember his name, but he said some quite damaging things about people of colour in the past, some quite scary things about how we should be treated and things and stuff, at least in my opinion, from how I read it. I'd say I'd be slightly worried. But again, like I said before, I expect that if I am elected, or anyone that is elected to that parliament, they're elected to represent their constituency, represent their party, and they're elected to do that as adults. And I'd expect there to be respect there. Of course, I disagree 100% with the direction of travel that Reform's going in, and I will do everything in my power to fight that narrative and to fight people pointing at fingers at the more vulnerable in society.
But you still think there should be a respectful debate, even if people you very much disagree with in terms of their politics.
Politics is about debate, but you don't get a respectful debate if you're threatening people's human rights. So it depends on what their debates want. We can have a debate about their plans to cut our public spending. We can have a debate about how that would harm the more vulnerable in society. But I'm not going to sit here and debate the merits of certain things in society.
Right. But it could be really some very fiery and difficult sort of situations in Parliament then, between if Reform and the Scottish Greens are both elected in strong numbers and fundamentally disagree with each other on very sensitive issues. It could be, sounds to me as if it could be quite difficult and I think very emotional at times as well.
I think it depends. There is a lot in politics that can be very emotional. And I think too often I've found that politics gets divorced from emotion. We often think, and of course you wouldn't when it comes to the grand schemes about numbers on a spreadsheet. We forget that these are people's lives. It's the same reason why I got into politics. This has been my life. And too often you watch it on TV just being dealt with theoretically. I'm sure there are many, many, many people in that parliament, not just the elected members, but the people who work there, that feel strongly about a lot of issues. And the hope is that we can work together as a parliament to make things better in this country. That's all I can really say. I can't imagine what the parliament itself might be like.
Right. So last question, Iris. So there's all obviously now less than 100 days to polling days. What are your priorities for the next few weeks ahead?
Getting on as many doors as I can, making my message heard, and making sure I'm listening to the people as well. Obviously, as a student and as someone who works full time, I'm trying to fit that around as much time as I can. But I'm really looking forward to getting back on the doors and knocking as many as I can.
Have you got any number of doors that you're trying to target every day, or is that going to be way too much?
I've not really thought of a number. I wish I could touch the entire constituency, but it will just be, I've got me and my canvassers are just hitting as many as we physically can on as many nights as we physically can, and we're really in it to win it this time. Some of the polls are saying that we might be able to win this constituency, so I'm fighting my very hardest to do so.
Iris Duane, the Green candidate for Glasgow Kelvin and Maryhill, speaking to my colleague Kathleen Nutt. That's it for this week's episode of Unspun. We'll be back again soon. Please, if you enjoyed this, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, leave a review, get in touch. Thank you very much, and goodbye.